People who don't care, that's not a type.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it is a type, but it's not a Myers-Briggs type.
Not a Myers-Briggs type. Yeah, for sure.
So I always tell people when you start a project, it's a good idea to ask people. And like I said, you don't have to know their type. It's a good idea to ask people, like, do you tend to work better at the last minute? Mm-hmm. Do you tend to like to get things in super early? And most people, well, and I'll go ahead and talk about this because I was trying to make this two separate subjects, but it's kind of the same subject. It's kind of the same.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So we always talk about procrastination. And I think that when you look at Myers-Briggs, people think perceiving is procrastination.
Right.
But procrastination is human. Welcome to Personality Playbook. My name's Sadie Young.
And I'm Kayla Whittle.
And today we're going to talk about judging and perceiving.
Yes.
And judging and perceiving are how we organize our outside environment and how we plan and complete the tasks that we plan and complete. Or, sometimes I say it's how we choose not to organize our outside environment.
Exactly.
Because some people don't do that as much or more go with the flow.
Right.
So we're back to a place now. Our last couple of episodes, Kayla and I have been the same in preference with the NF. And so now we're back to where Kayla and I are different. Yes. So since I'm an INFJ, I'm going to take the J part. And since Kayla is an ENFP, she's going to take the
I'm going to take the P part.
You're going to take a P.
Don't worry, I'm ready.
Not on camera. Don't worry. It's going to be fun. So I'll go ahead and get us kicked off with judging. First of all, this is one where I only hate one of the words. Perceiving doesn't bother me so much as a term, but right. Judging, when I first found out I was an INFJ, I was like, oh, I and an F they sound lovely.
Yeah.
And then judgmental. I'm like the nicest judgmental, rude person in the entire world.
Actually, a lot of times when I'm working through this with people, I don't give them these words.
Oh, you just say J?
The full words. No, I wait.
Oh, okay.
I wait to give them the full words because people just struggle with that J.
Yeah.
So much. So I just typically just say J and P, and then at the end I'm like, okay, don't worry about it, but this is actually what it is.
Right. Well, and once you get into type dynamics and things, I think it really makes a lot more sense. Mm-hmm. But you cannot get into that in the beginning because it makes your brain explode.
Right.
So you really do. And, that's always hard for me when doing this because I kind of want to get into it. And then I'm like, just stop because you're going to ruin the entire experience for the person if you do that.
This is like when I sat in Calc 1 in college and the professor came in and was like, hey, I normally teach Calc 3, but I decided just for fun, I would teach Calc 1 again. I haven't taught it in years. It just didn't go well,
I would imagine not.
Especially not for this ENFP, It's like, wait a second.
Right. Oh, man. Well, all right. So, besides the fact that we're mentioning that judging types are not, that doesn't mean we're judgmental. What does it mean?
Right.
So these are people who want their outside world to be organized and planned. These are people who... All right. Now, this gets people sometimes because I always say that judging types like a checklist, which is true. Now, if you're, a lot of times this is a physical checklist.
Right.
For a lot of people it is.
Sure.
Even if it's not a physical checklist, because I don't write things down. I don't make just the paper and maybe sometimes, right. Being an intuitive type, I'm more of a gisty planner type of a person. That's what I describe myself as a gisty planner. So for me, there's a checklist in my head, but I see it.
Oh, you actually visualize a checklist.
I actually, I at least hear check. So
wow, no, that's really cool. I've never had that experience, believe it or not. Tell me more.
Like, does she have a car? He.
No. Tell me more.
So people who prefer judging tend to have that checklist experience. And there are some people, and you know who you are, there are some people who love their checklist so much and get so much satisfaction from those things that even if they do something that was not on their checklist, they will write it down on their checklist after they finished it just so they can check the box, because that is the most exciting thing ever to them. And I totally felt like I was going to fall out of my chair just then.
My sister-in-law actually told me that yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she had called me, excuse me, and she was working on something. And she said, I don't think this is normal. She was like, when I'm like doing something, she was like, I really need I need to feel like I'm making progress. Like the way she explained her list. And she's like, so if I know I've done something that wasn't on my to-do list, and she has the physical to-do list, right? She says, then I add it and I check it off. Like, how crazy does that make me? And I was like, actually, I hear that a lot, you know what I mean? From people, because I do this all the time. So I was able to kind of reaffirm for her.
Right.
It sounds maybe crazy to some people, but for you, it helps her with forward progress.
Yep.
Right? Like, I actually have gotten things done today. Let me write those things down and check them off so that I know that, like success breeds success, or like that momentum to continue to get things done throughout the day.
Yeah. And I would say that's probably like, as we get towards the end of our sets of preferences here, we start talking about how they combine with each other. So I tend to think that particular thing is, while anybody can do it, it's more of an SJ thing.
Yeah.
Because
she's an SJ.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So those details, because we talked about in the S video that one thing to an intuitive type might be 50 things to a sensing type, and you want to get credit in your mind for all 50 of those things.
Absolutely.
And I have no problem with that, because I didn't do all 50 of those things. I did like 15 of them and called it fine.
Yes. Yes.
So these are people who also judging types who begin with the end in mind. So, we're kind of always working towards that finish point. I'm not somebody who is going to just start something. I feel weird when I say that. I know that there are people who do that, and I think I'm sitting across from one for him. But
100%.
But I will figure out what I'm going to do by what my goal is.
Right.
So, I figure out what I'm trying to achieve, and then I work backwards from that.
Right, which I, even as a perceiving type, think that makes a lot of sense. It's just not what I do. I'm like, oh, this would be really fun today.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean,
so that's what I'm going to do.
Even when I'm working on art pieces, like when I did this, I measured the wall.
Yeah, by the way, pause. If you're not listening and you're watching, Sadie is an artist, and she put all of this together. Look at that. Gorgeous.
By the way, I call it dichotomy.
Wow, that's so intuitive of you.
You see, because each of the blocks.
Yeah, each of the blocks.
Yeah. So, and those are different combinations of dichotomies, and it represents that we're not trying to shove people in a particular box, because there are many shades of type.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
Isn't that meaningful?
And when you're an NF, everything means something.
Yeah. The ISTJs are like, can you move on, please?
Right. I know. Like, this is not important. You have, I'm sure my husband's sitting over here like, oh my God, the colored sticks again. But like when I start planning an art piece, at least for myself, I measured the wall and figured out, okay, I want the art piece to be this size, because I didn't want it to be wider than the piano.
Okay.
Because I knew the piano was going to be there, but I wanted it to be close.
Because you were planning this specific piece for this specific spot.
I was in this case. And so, so I figured out I wanted the piece to be a certain size. And so from then, I tried to divide to make sure that I didn't have to have any partial pieces on the edges. I wanted all whole pieces. So that's how I figured out the size of the pieces in...
You did the math.
I did the math first. But we can't call it math because I hate math. So it was design, or maybe a smattering of like really pathetic engineering.
Right.
I don't want to insult engineers who actually do stuff.
Well, but I think this, we're joking about, hey, we just took a little bunny trail to talk about art. But I think it's something important to say that really lots of different types can be creative.
Oh, absolutely.
And creativity really plays out and manifests really differently in different personality types.
Yes.
I would also call myself a creative, but I would never approach an art piece in the way that you did because you're a J. I can't tell you how many times I haven't painted in a while because I've been busy with all my other hobbies that I've started.
And also your children.
And my children and, all the things. But I'll start painting and not know what I'm painting. And Chad's like, oh, what are you painting, my husband? And I'm like, oh, I don't know yet. I'm just going to see where it goes. Happens. And he's like, oh. And like super weird. But I like that to me, that's where creativity is birthed and how it feels.
Right.
But both of these versions are creativity.
Yes.
But you might be listening to Sadie and think, oh, that's not my thing, but it could just be that your creativity just plays out differently.
And I'll tell you, I have tried so many times feeling like your way of creativity where you just start and see what happens. I've tried so many times to do it. And you know what happens when I do that? I end up hating it. And then I will plan something else to go over it. I made a painting of my sister's dog one year. And I don't think she knows this, but underneath it was my attempt at making a fall pile of leaves. That was so ugly.
And you were like, not it.
And now it's my sister's dog and she loves it.
See?
So it's the best gift I ever gave her. I think she cried. So that was how to be an intuitive type in the middle of your J discussion. That was not a J thing that I just did there. Rabbit trails.
Right.
So, yes. So we begin with the end in mind. And sometimes a pitfall of being a judging type is that you might be so attached to your plan that even when you need to separate from your plan, you like to stay attached to your plan. You're clinging to it because my plan was pretty and don't ruin my plan.
And because you spent so much time like putting it together and thinking it through.
Yeah. And so
it feels like putting that work in the trash can.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, when you really start to, I think you can do that a little bit when you're younger and, things are simpler that you're making decisions about and that you're planning and that kind of thing, like what your mud pie is going to look like. And wait, do people still do that? Maybe.
I'm sure there's some reason that they don't anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Like all the things we used to do, there's now reasons that we can't.
The mud has been environmentally
because yellow makes people sad or something. I don't know.
That's true. Oh, that's so sad for Yellow. Big Bird makes me happy still, and he's yellow.
He is.
So,
and he's really tall, too.
He is really tall, which, that would just hurt my neck, but it'd be okay for Big Bird. So sometimes that can be a pitfall. And I think as things get more complicated, a lot of times judging types will learn that they just need to have multiple plans. Instead of, that's kind of the J version of going with the flow is to have 6 backup plans. Like
if this, then this, if that, then that. Right. Maybe it'll go this way, and in that case, we'll do this.
Yes, it's like a decision tree or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And so that can really help judging types feel better in those situations. And so one thing that they may do also is they may be so excited about making a decision that they will just make it without having enough information to make it. Mm-hmm. So I'll never forget, I'm not going to name names in case this person ever watches this, but somebody cracked me. It was one of my favorite people when I worked at Mattress Firm selling mattresses a long time ago. And I was a trainer, so I was always training new people and stuff. And this would always be like, what are you doing? Somebody would call the store and say it usually seemed like it was a bed frame. Like, I need a king size bed frame. How much is it? Do you have it in stock? Dude would say yes.
Oh,
he didn't look to see if we had one.
Oh, yeah. He's like, we're a mattress store. Of course we have that.
Right. And I'm like, they ask for the weirdest frame ever. And no, I don't have one of those big clunky things in my closet of a back room.
Right.
And
we'd have to order
told those people, right. Yeah. It'll be here like next Thursday and it's Saturday.
But because we're a mattress store, the facts, right? Let's go to the facts. The facts are we're a mattress store. We have bed frames. They're looking for something. I maybe don't have all the information, but I feel like I do. And so I can be decisive and say, oh, this will get a sale. Sale. Came out really weird.
Oh no, don't get me started on that, because a lot of people say sail.
I know.
I got to sail.
But not like a boat. Oh my goodness gracious. But no, like just making that, like, yes, we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just, make that decision.
Yeah.
And, it could be because we had people that floated, there were some stores that had bigger back rooms and would have had that in stock all the time.
But it's like, hey, you need all of the facts and figures for where you currently are in this moment. Maybe not things that you've gathered throughout your life. You need this place. You need the facts from this store or whatever this situation that you're in before you make a decision.
Yeah. And dude, it's like 5 feet to the back room.
Yeah.
So
just
go check. Just go back. Send me back there. I don't care that I'm your boss. I want you to give the correct information.
Right.
So, that's the kind of thing and of course that's a tiny example of it, but just wanting to have things over and done with. When you're talking about bigger life decisions, sometimes that could look like, having most of the I saw this all the time. I would have kids come in my office when we were at West Georgia, and they would be like, I've decided I want to major in engineering. And I'm like, you don't have that.
Right.
And so like I had kids sometimes that would tell me, I've always known I want to major in this. And I'm like, why did you come here? Because we don't have, they don't have that here. Did you read the brochure?
Right.
So, maybe the location was convenient and their friends were going here and they just assumed the rest would work itself out.
Yeah.
And so, they really needed, that just always drove me crazy because I'm going, this is a big, important life decision. Like, what if you pick your spouse out based off how they look?
Sure.
You're going to end up divorced 14 times.
Right.
Nobody wants that.
Or just, in relationships, replacing assumptions as facts, right? So I've seen a couple of details of how this person acts.
Right.
I really don't have a full picture, but I figured you out because I want to make a decision about you.
Right.
And who you are.
Yeah.
And understand you. And so splat, there it is.
Right. Yeah. Or, like assuming that someone wants to have children or assuming that somebody wants
instead
to
of
get
having the
married
conversation.
Instead of having the conversation because, you're like, you don't want anything. That's that thing we were talking about. I don't want any, like, I've decided that you're my person.
Right.
And I'm in love with you. And so I don't want anything to mess up my plan. So I'm just going to assume that this is going to work out.
Yeah. The assumption
can
lead to like just avoidance of conversation because I don't want the plan disturbed.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So, because as we know, getting started with a whole new person is just a whole new thing. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because of all of these things, judging and perceiving types can seem rigid and demanding to perceiving types. And I mean, you can see how that would be the case. You can probably really see how that would be the case because
she's laughing because I'm a P and my husband is a J. Yeah.
Well, and my husband and I are both J's, but since he's an SJ,
it's different.
He's a detailed J, and I'm a gisty J. Yeah. So and in this whole rabbit trail thing, he's like, get back on the point. And I will get begin with the end in mind. I'll meander on my way there.
Right.
But I still know where I'm going.
You'll land the plane.
Yeah. But he likes to stay on the path, and I like to do
yes.
Still making forward progress.
Right.
But yeah.
Right.
So yeah, so I feel like that's probably
I think that covers the J type for sure. Yeah. So perceiving types, they just approach things differently. So I think Sadie started the podcast with how you like to organize your outer world or your inner world or not. Right. And that is definitely true for perceiving types. It's much less about the future plan and much more about the present moment.
Yes.
And, interruptions can even be exciting for a perception type.
Yes, when you say that.
She just breathed deeply.
Did you see the flames in my eyes that were like, not the interruption?
Right. And, I think what's interesting about that is that can really split a group of people. Like when we talk about that, right? Like this can be like a very dichotomous group, our J's and P's. And once you figure out as we're talking where you're landing, it's like, oh yeah, that's, that's me. Like it's to the core. But yeah, for me, interruptions are like, oh man, maybe this will be more exciting than what I thought was going to happen today.
Or maybe it will bring you information that you weren't otherwise going to get. And that makes the experience
absolutely
go in a better place.
Right. And I think, it's hard. I think in our society, like the value system that we put together, you really have to be a judging type to understand like the way a week works and the way a day works and like making appointments and showing up, you know what I mean? Like all of these things are very much like leaning towards. So you don't have to have a value system when you're a J, right? You know what I mean? It's like this society just kind of like affirms that the way you do things, which we didn't do that. The split and the...
Oh, we didn't. Okay, so J and P are a 50-50 split in the population, but for sure the ideal... And I'm putting air quotes on this because, there are some countries where this is not the case. But the ideal type in the United States is considered, for a man at least, is considered to be ESTJ. Mm-hmm. And so that definitely fits with what you're saying.
Right. That there's that society, like American society. I should have been a little more specific with that. Imagine that I wasn't specific enough. But American society is going to affirm the J type. Yes. Right. So I have found myself in talking with people who are J's and P's. J's are very much like, yes, because that's how it's supposed to be.
No.
It's like, no, it's actually because that's how you think.
Right, because America is totally based on productivity.
Right, and exactly. And here's the truth. I'm a P, but I have appointments that I make with people all the time. Right. And I have to be there on time. And I have to, you know what I mean? Like that, I have to keep a schedule. Like that's just part of it. However, here's how I explain it. Mm-hmm. So I explain it either with like a firefighter or even in my last job as a school counselor.
Yeah.
If interruptions disturbed me as much as they disturb a J, I could have never been effective at that job.
Yeah.
Right? Because I had an idea of what I wanted to get done as a school counselor.
Yeah.
A firefighter probably has an idea of what they're going to do that day. There's always like training or things they're going to work on, right?
Right.
But if I was aggravated every time a student was like, hey, Miss Whittle, like I need to talk for a minute.
Yeah.
Right? That would be a miserable job for me.
Yeah.
And if a firefighter didn't find it kind of exciting when they get a call, which, you know, not exciting like they're happy that something's on fire, but like there's excitement and ready to go.
Have energy behind
If there weren't perceiving types, those positions would just be full of miserable people. Right. So there actually is value in liking an interruption. You know what I mean? Like in enjoying the kind of like spontaneity of here and there, which we'll talk about at the end. I want to bring up the word spontaneous because, you know.
And procrastination.
Right. We're going to talk about those too. Yeah. Absolutely, for sure.
I'm just picturing in my head, like if your EMT came out to you and was like, dude, I'm not scheduled for a heart attack for another 20 minutes. Could you just
exactly,
keep that?
Exactly. Like we, you know, and so I always find myself kind of like starting off with a little bit of a like, we bring value to the world, you know. But yeah, so we look at the world and we see options that need to be explored. We see opportunities kind of like in the present moment to like stop and have a really cool conversation, right? So sometimes we'll be out and about, and a little bit of this is extrovert and introvert, right? But I think a lot of it is J and P as well.
Yeah.
So like if we're out at a store and my husband has a plan of the things that we're going to grab, and then we're going to head out. Mm-hmm. If we see someone we know, I see that as a really cool opportunity. Oh my gosh, our friend is here, right? And that doesn't feel like it's squashing any plans that I have, right?
Right.
But even the plan of, we just came in here to get blank, 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 you know, to go through the self-checkout because it's faster and we're going to go home. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and I'm going to watch the game or whatever, because he probably has it lined up in his head.
Yeah.
Of what we're going to do throughout the day. And for me, it's like, oh, this is an opportunity.
Yes.
More than a disruption or an interruption. And it doesn't matter. Chad and I can like the individual equally. Yeah. Right? It's really just about, this is what I thought we were going to do today. And for me, it's like, oh, well, we thought we were going to do that, but look who's here.
Right.
Which is really cool. Yeah. Yeah. So P's like to leave things open to gather more information. So I find myself often like wondering like, oh, I wonder if there's something else about that person I don't know yet. Because me, I'm more people oriented. But then for P's who are more task oriented, they're going to just be tinkerers, right? Like, let's leave this open and maybe we'll figure out a new way to fix this, or, to deal with these parts or something.
Yeah, these are people who kind of like to like take the lawnmower apart to see how it works.
Just to see how it works.
Yeah, and then that's happened to me before. I came home and someone had taken apart my lawnmower, and I was like, "Oh, what was wrong with it?" Nothing.
I just was curious.
Yeah, and put it back together fine. And I'm like, well, it works. I guess that was it. But I'm like, what? Why would you? Right. So a lot of times these are people who, make good mechanics and, IT type people. And,
right.
Yeah, because they enjoy the process of understanding.
And I think that's why I like counseling with people. It's not, I can really just be in the moment and be present and say, hey, let's figure out where today is going to take us.
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel intimidating or overwhelming for me. That's like a comfortable space for me.
And I kind of feel like for myself, that's a little bit why counseling was, and I mean this both with me as the counselor and me in counseling.
Sure, yeah.
Both ways this works. That the process was a little bit frustrating for me. I mean, I understand the need for it, but then I'm like, okay, we're done now. And where are we going next?
Yeah,
and
how do we tie this up with a bow?
Right. And it's not time to move on yet. So while there are fantastic counselors who are J's, I found myself wishing I was teaching it instead of doing it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Because that just... let's let this space take us where it needs to take us, right, is a cool thing for P's and is kind of like, what are we doing for J's, right?
Yes, my P boss used to say, sit in the depression and see where it's taking you. And I'm like, why would I want to do that? That's horrible. I want to. It's telling me to go to a better place. That's what it's telling me.
I don't want to sit in it. I don't want to feel it. Yeah. But yeah, so P's often can have like unfinished projects, which is, definitely me. Like I feel like I have my hand in 1,000 different things all the time, but I like it that way. And it doesn't bother me that there's like a loose end somewhere and, it's not tied up.
Yeah, I always talk about the half painted wall. I have
the 3 bottom steps at my house haven't had carpet on them for like a couple of years.
Okay.
And it's okay.
I'm not really going to talk because what you guys don't see on the video is that we're sitting across from where I ripped out my entire kitchen. And yes, I mean, I ripped out all the kitchen cabinets, I think 3 years ago. And I don't know about you, Kayla, but I don't see any cabinets.
Yeah, they're not there yet. But I will say that you do have a kitchen. It's just downstairs.
That's true.
Yes. So I think if you hadn't had a kitchen,
I had
necessity is the mother of invention, right? You would have gotten
I mean, there were other people living here using that kitchen when I ripped it out. It's technically functional, but it's not really... It kind of looks like we're camping in a room.
Yeah. Well, I will say, though, it is more likely for P's to have unfinished projects than J's, typically.
Sure, yeah.
And not be bothered by the unfinished project, right? So Chad, my husband, might have some unfinished projects, but he's bothered by them.
Yes.
He's like,
I'm
okay,
bothered.
I really need, like, it's kind of like eating away at him. And I'm just kind of like, well.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say too, because obviously what I said was kind of a monkey wrench in the J thing.
No, you're fine.
Well, I'll bring this up that sometimes life forces, just like you were talking about, P's are forced to J.
Yeah.
I mean,
we
J
have to.
is a verb, but not as a judging verb. But yeah, because that is what society demands. I have been, because of chronic illness, forced into acting like a P.
Right.
So saying
like, if I wake up today and feel like tackling this, I will. And if I don't, then I'm going to be kind to myself today.
Yeah.
In the middle of that.
Oh, yeah. It'd be nice if I was kind to myself about it. But as a J, I have a tendency to be like, I can't do this today. And now I'm going to give myself, older about it. So, which is not the best way to go. But that's something that I've learned.
Right.
I'm still working on it, but I've learned to cope with because that's,
Right. And I feel like that's a really good bridge for a way that I've learned to cope in a J world as a P, which I'm going to go back, rewind the tapes here to lists for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Because I joke, I say, judging types have lists because they have lists. Mm-hmm. There's lists in their head about what they're going to get through in the day, in the week, in the month, in the year, right? Or there's lists of completing a task. Like, you said you're checking things off in your mind. Yeah. Because I don't have that naturally happening, I make a list so I don't forget everything.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? So like the list is not because like it's aesthetically pleasing or because like my sister-in-law was saying on the phone, it doesn't give me momentum.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's not a motivator for me.
You don't go check, yay!
Yeah. And heaven's sake, if I'm packing and I have like a packing list or something, which sounds very foreign to me, but like if I were to put something in the suitcase that wasn't on the packing list, I'm not adding it to the list.
Yeah.
To check off, right? But the list for me is like survival.
Yeah.
Like if I don't get this, if I don't come up with a way, like a method for me to organize in some way, I will forget because I'm not future oriented. I'm not thinking about the next couple of weeks ahead. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And sometimes in a present moment with a client, I'm in that present moment and then I'm like, oh yeah, I have another client coming in.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I really try to be in that space.
Yeah.
So these lists or my planner, she's not aesthetically pleasing. Like it's scribbled. You see it? It's scribbled. There's notes everywhere. It's different color pens that don't have a meaning.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I was about to say, especially for FJs, they like to make it gorgeous with the highlighters.
My daughter's planner is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And she's in 6th grade. Like she loves that, like the organization that also like is pretty on the eye.
Yeah,
she likes rainbow order in her closet.
Ooh, RG Biv in her. I like it.
She loves all of that. So if you look at my planner, you think, wow, nutty professor. But for me, it's like I have a planner. I use a list because I can't remember everything without it.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking to Chad about it, he's always like, well, I mean, it's in your head too. And I'm like, but it's not holding a place in my head.
Right.
I have to text myself if I'm going to the store, the 3 things that I need.
Yeah.
Or rehearse it. Coffee creamer, paper towels.
Yeah.
I have to just say it over and over and over again. And then sometimes I get there and I'm like, oh, where did it go? But no, like that's so lists for me are just like a necessary evil.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about them. Like they just keep me from forgetting. So I wanted to add that in there. So P's sometimes can have trouble deciding because we do, I mean, like the open-ended piece of things kind of allows us to explore more and have more opportunity for something better to come along.
My favorite story.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and you're probably going to be like, why is this your favorite story? This is totally normal.
That happens every day.
But one of my favorite people that I used to work with, who was my counselor for a very long time, her name was Stacy. You remember Stacy, don't you?
I know Stacy.
Yeah. If Stacy's watching, hello, and I miss you.
Hi, Stacy.
And so she told me one time that if somebody asked her on Wednesday to go on a trip that weekend, that she would say no. And I was like, of course you would say no, because who's going to keep your dogs? And you don't have time to like pack, and you don't have time to figure out, this and that, where you're going to stay, and you can't do all the research and all that kind of stuff. And Stacy was like, no. When somebody asks me on Wednesday, I'm going to say no because somebody might come along with a better offer on Friday.
You just never know.
That's so close. So I was just sitting there like, if somebody asks you to go, I mean, like if I'm at Friday, I'm in my pajamas for the rest of the weekend because nobody asked me to do anything 2 months ago.
2 months ago. That is awesome.
And yeah, if you ask me to go out to dinner now, I'm going to be like, I really have to like you.
Yeah. Well, okay, so this is a perfect example because this literally did happen on today.
Yeah.
This day.
Okay.
So Chad told me, oh gosh, sometime last week that he was getting his oil changed in his truck this morning. So he had already he told me last week. I remember him telling me, but did I remember, was it present? No, it was there, but I can verify that he did in fact tell me.
You can call it up, but you need somebody to tell you to call it up. Yeah.
So he had told me, and he was like, we'll drop my truck off on last night. So we'll only have your car in the morning. And we do like carpool for kids, getting, everybody in different places. And so it requires like a little extra planning in advance to know like how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So So last night I'm putting my shoes on because we got to run to the store for something. And he said, hey, what is your schedule like in the morning? When is your first client? Because remember, we've got to drop my truck off while we're out.
Right.
And I was like, oh yeah, I need to look and see what time my first client is. And then I sat there for a minute and something in my brain was like, tomorrow's different. And I was like, yeah, hold on. Oh, I was like, no, I gotta go to Sadie's tomorrow. Like, we're filming in the morning because I'm going late, because I'm going to stay late, because and he was like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's like, I'm just trying to drop you off at work because he has the day off. He's like, where does Sadie live? What are we going to do?
Like 5 feet away from me, thank God.
And I said, oh, it'll be fine. I said, she doesn't live that far away. You can just drop me there instead of work. I said, I'm sure Sadie can drop me off at the church. Mm-hmm. And he was like, he looks at me, he's like, are you going to ask her? And I was like, I really don't think it's going to be a problem.
No.
And he was like,
it is for him.
I need to know. So I did. I texted you last night, which was very not pee of me. Like,
right.
Do you think after we film tomorrow, you could drop me off at my office? And she's like, yeah, no problem. So this morning we wake up and Chad's like, did you talk to Sadie? Is she going to drop you off? Right? I'm like, yes, we're fine. But that was just this moment where it was like, I'm sure that, like the last point on here is that perceiving types can seem disorganized, irresponsible, or irresponsible to judging types, right? So for Chad, he's like, hey, we're a partnership here. I told you last week, like, where is your head at? And somehow I just always feel like things are going to work out and it's going to be fine. It's not that big of a deal, but it's a big deal for him. And so that's really just been kind of how our marriage has been back and forth, which is why he tells me and why last night he was like, where are we at? What are you doing? What's going on? Right. And, but I think the cool place that you can get in a J and P relationship, whether that be friendships or just J's dealing with P's at work or marriage relationship, is that, again, and I always go back to this, like, how do we value the other type, right? Like, how do we say, hey, we're better together? And how do you encourage other people to value your type? Yeah. So when we go on vacation, I'd know nothing. Yeah. Like, I don't know anything about what we're doing or where we're going. Chad makes the spreadsheet usually. It's got the budget. It's got a plan. And I am so thankful that he does that. Yeah. So thankful. We went to Disney one time. He didn't know much about Disney, but we went to Disney with another friend who's a J. And she does know Disney like the back of her hand. And man, we had such a full experience because I went with J's. You know what I mean? Like, and I can say that for trips that Chad's planned or trips that my friend who's a J, like we've gone as like a couple, like a group together. And that was great. It was so full because there were J's on the trip. But it was so fun because I was on the trip. Right. You know what I mean? And Chad can see that too, right? Like, he's like, hey, we're going to plan all of this, but like the road trip's not going to be boring because Kayla's going to talk about what the clouds are shaped like and keep the conversation going and, whatever else. And he can have value for what I bring to the table too. Yeah. And we can just laugh at the differences, right? Right. So we're standing in line at the airport on our last trip. And the lady behind me, of course, I'm talking to her because I'm extremely extroverted. So I'm talking to her, and I think she's an extrovert too. So I try to like make sure I'm not getting on people's nerves when I'm talking to them. But I'm pretty sure I was reading her. I think she was an extrovert too. So she's like, "Oh, where are you headed?" And I was like, "Oh, we're going to Baltimore." And Chad goes, "No, we're not." And I was like, what? And he said, we're flying into D.C., babe. We're not going to Baltimore. We're flying into D.C. I was like, oh, I thought we were flying into Baltimore. This lady is cracking up because I'm standing in line, like boarding pass on my phone, ID out, like our shoes are off. I'm headed to Baltimore. She's like, wow, what is that? And it really didn't bother me. Yeah. Like if somebody told Chad in the security line that he was going to a different city than he thought he was going, he would be like, let's go home. Like what are we going to do? And I'm like, oh, DC. He was like, yeah, we're going to end up in Baltimore. He said, we're flying into D.C., and he planned it.
Yeah.
He said, because we're going to tour D.C. before we head towards Baltimore. So it made more sense for us to fly in there so we had more time.
Okay.
So anyway, there's that.
That's great.
So I don't know. Hopefully that gives a good overview of a perceiving type. It's kind of like this go with the flow, like be in the present moment, a little less future-minded.
Love to start.
Yeah. Do what? Love to start.
Love to start. Yeah. Whereas Jay's love to finish.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. And oh gosh,
I know. What's up with that?
We went to sleep. I don't know what happened.
This is what happens when Ben leaves.
Everything falls apart. No, we were just talking about our laptop here. It went to sleep.
There we go.
Yeah. So that's kind of the overarching description of a perceiving type, is this kind of open-ended framework for life.
Yeah.
Which again can cause a lot of rifts. I mean, I think one thing I might have left out, look at me. Look at me peeing my way around here.
Well, do you want to go to the visual learners?
1 second.
1 second.
Because I have a thought, is that sometimes we think there's plenty of time to get things done.
Oh, that's an excellent segue into the visual learners.
Okay. And there's not plenty of time to get things done.
Gotcha.
And so I think for me as a P, I have learned to overestimate because I try to pack so much in.
Yeah.
So, and what's funny is, I think by and large, you would say a P is more likely to be late than a J. You know what I mean? Like if you theoretically a P is more likely. So, but Chad and I are opposite of that as a J and a P.
Okay.
I am more likely to be early because I don't know exactly how long it takes to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Everything is in increments of 15 minutes to me.
Yeah.
So I have to leave at like 6:15, 6:30, 6:45, or 7.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if it takes 20 minutes to get somewhere,
that's an extra 15, so you're going to be 10 minutes early.
I'm going to be 10 minutes early because I don't. And Chad, because he's a J and he's detail-oriented, he's like, he'll say this, it takes 7 minutes to drive there. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Who thinks like that?
Right.
And he's like, no, it's 7 minutes. I'm like, who knows 7? Do you know what I mean? Like
that's not one of the quarters on the clock.
Okay, like, who says 7? So he's more likely to be like exactly on time, or maybe even a little late, because he'll get frustrated if the light takes longer or somebody's driving slow in front of him or whatever, because he plans this specific time set.
Wow.
In that. So it's very J oriented.
Yeah.
Right. The way that he does that, because he plans so specifically. But I'm early because I know I don't have the details of exactly how long.
See, that's really interesting, because Ben and Chad are the same type. They're both ISTJs. Mm-hmm. Ben needs to leave like 7 days early.
Yeah.
So I joke with him every time he takes a flight somewhere that, like if he's going somewhere next week, I'll say, oh, so you're going to leave tomorrow at 2:30? Because if he has an 8 o'clock at night flight, he'll leave at noon.
Yeah. Well, flying, I think, is maybe a little bit different.
But you should see how early we get to my doctor's appointments.
Oh, you get really early to those too? Okay.
Because
I wonder what that is. I think for Chad, it could also be like avoiding small talk before something starts.
Okay.
I think it could be like, if this starts in 9 minutes and we're 7 minutes away,
you're gonna have to come up with 2 whole minutes of
conversation.
Oh no!
So he's like, I think he would rather just like walk in and sit down and something start.
Now I will tell you that a lot of times when we get to my doctor's appointments, 45 minutes early, we'll usually stay in the car. Talk to each other.
He knows. He knows this girl's not staying in the car. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna ask the front desk lady how her morning was.
Right.
And Chad's like, no, we're leaving with 7 minutes to spare or whatever.
Oh, that's hilarious. Here we have a big project,
And you can see that we have a judging type and a perceiving type. And you can see that the judging type has broken this project up into 5 pieces because the perceiving type wouldn't have any reason to do that. So as the judging type works their way through this project, you see that deadline is hanging over the judging type's head as they work steadily through the steps of the project, and they're not going to be able to relax until it's done. But when the project's finally done, the judging type can take a little nap and have a little rest. And yes, he's breathing very slowly while he is sleeping. So then we also have a perceiving type, and the perceiving type is, just as committed to the project and getting things done well, but you'll notice the perceiving type's got plenty of time. He can kind of hang out. In fact, he can even take a little nap before the project is done. But then you'll see at the very last minute, that perceiving type is going to jump up and finish in a flourish, and now he's panting because he's exhausted from that burst of energy right before the deadline. And that is what we've been talking about with judging types liking to work through things steadily and begin with the end in mind and work first and then play second, versus perceiving types tending to be more pressure prompted, where they will get a burst of energy right before the deadline and be able to get a ton of work done in a very small period of time and finish in a flourish. And I hope this has helped you for the visual learners.
All right, now we're back, and I think you can see what we were talking about with some of that, the animation with we've got plenty of time, and we'll just take ourselves a little nap before we need to be finished. And the J is just like, must move solidly through a deadline, help.
Yes.
And now I'm reenacting the visual learner thing, even though it is over.
I love that.
So yeah, there are a few things that I always talk about with judging and perceiving. And I think the first one is group work. Okay. And of course, we ran into this. When I first started doing Myers-Briggs, I had so many assumptions when I first started doing Myers-Briggs with groups of college students that they just slashed and were like, you are wrong. Right. Because I think at that time, I assumed that extroverts liked group work and introverts didn't. And what I quickly discovered is that nobody likes group work.
Nobody likes group work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there are different reasons for that with different people. Mm-hmm. But I've always felt like JP is the biggest problem area that you run into with group work because of the fact that, honestly, I think it's because judging types usually a judging type will end up leading the group. I would say. Not always, but usually. Yeah. And so what will tend to happen, judging types have an idea in their head of what the last minute is, and it's not the same thing as the idea of last minute that a perceiving type has. Right. Like one of our friends from the counseling center she used to text me when we were in grad school, and she'd be like, all of our assignments would be due at 11:59 at night, like the minute before midnight. Right. And she'd text me and be like, I got my work in at 11:59. And I'm like, wow, that was really late. And she's like, no, it was on time. And, one time she got it in at 11:57. And early. She was like way early. She had so much time after that. And she just, was complete. And, we used to laugh about it so much because I thought it was great that she was that brave. Look how brave she is. Because I would have thought that I did my work last minute.
At 10 p.m. Oh, wait. No,
like 9. 9 would be I'm having a panic attack.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, preferably the day before, but I mean, I can take it more than a lot of Jays can.
I had a visceral response when you said the day before.
Yeah.
I felt not. You want to do your work the day before it's due?
No, I wish it was
so
just
many more fun things you could do.
I know. Well, I'm with you on that. For sure. Then, yeah, writing papers. Like, I used to clean my baseboards rather than do that. But,
Yeah.
and that's not fun. I haven't done it since. But
I do a lot of that lately.
I'm sure.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So, I always tell people, you don't have to know somebody's type in order to have the conversation that will help you avoid the conflicts over type. Because
For group work.
Right.
Yeah.
Because what happens is judging types will think when they say, this is due by blah, 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 they assume that people have the same cushion built in. Like you were talking about your 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And, like our friend was telling me that 2 minutes early was early and she was proud of herself.
Right.
How do you think that would have gone over if a J had been assuming she was going to get it to him the day before?
Right.
So, and judging types will tend to, especially when you're, in those college years and you're not totally used to how people work and things, you're assuming that person is unreliable and they're not going to get it into you at all.
Right. Like you can't count on them.
Right.
They'd rather go and party than get their work done. They don't care about their work.
Right. And that's not what's happening usually. I mean, there's always that one
but
person.
I think there's probably some J's that fall into that category too,
Yeah. People who don't care, that's not a type.
Yeah.
Well, it is a type, but it's not a Myers-Briggs type.
It's not a Myers-Briggs type. Yeah, for sure.
So I always tell people when you start a project, it's a good idea to ask people. And like I said, you don't have to know their type. It's a good idea to ask people, like, do you tend to work better at the last minute? Mm-hmm. Do you tend to like to get things in super early? And most people, and I'll go ahead and talk about this because I was trying to make this two separate subjects, but it's kind of the same subject. It's kind of the same.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So we always talk about procrastination. And I think that when you look at Myers-Briggs, people think perceiving is procrastination.
Right.
But procrastination is human. People who don't care, that's not a type.
Yeah.
Well, it is a type, but it's not a Myers-Briggs type.
It's not a Myers-Briggs type. Yeah, for sure.
So I always tell people when you start a project, it's a good idea to ask people. And like I said, you don't have to know their type. It's a good idea to ask people, like, do you tend to work better at the last minute? Mm-hmm. Do you tend to like to get things in super early? And most people, and I'll go ahead and talk about this because I was trying to make this two separate subjects, but it's kind of the same subject. It's kind of the same.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So we always talk about procrastination. And I think that when you look at Myers-Briggs, people think perceiving is procrastination.
Right.
But procrastination is human.
Truly believe that the quality of work that I submit when I feel the pressure of the deadline is a higher quality than when I don't care quite as much because I'm not as close to the deadline.
Yeah. Because it energizes you.
Yeah. That deadline like energizes me. And I joke like the gods of inspiration, they visit me,
Your muse has kicked in.
Yeah. Like exactly. So I feel like that pressure, I perform at a higher level with the pressure.
Right.
And I genuinely believe that. So it's not like, oh, I'm delusional. And I think that,
no,
like I think I could write a paper a week in advance and I could write a paper the day of. And I think other people would also say the quality's better on the second one.
Right.
Because the passion of the deadline and the excitement and the like, the pressure does prompt me. So that's why I love that verbiage so much. Chad is so foreign to that. He's like, I just can't, because and this is a key difference if you're thinking through like whether you're a J or a P, is that the closer you get to the deadline, the less inspired a J feels and the more frozen they feel, like, oh my gosh, I'm anxious, I'm overwhelmed, I'm never going to think of the things that I need to think of to be able to say the things that I need to say.
Yes.
And they're like, I don't want to get caught in that space.
Right.
And I'm like, I've got to wait for that space.
Yes.
To feel like, ooh, okay, here I go. I'm ready.
Yes. And so I love that verbiage for that reason. And because saying that somebody procrastinating is avoidance.
Yeah.
And pressure prompting is, waiting for your best work to come.
Yeah.
So, getting back to that the EMT person we were talking about earlier,
yeah.
you know, you need to plan your heart attack better.
Yeah, right.
We need that person to be pressure prompted.
Right.
Because, you know, that person is at their best in that moment where they're needed the most.
Right.
And thank God, you know, ER nurses, like those are people who are probably, because they're pressure prompted, they're kind of bored when there isn't any pressure because they're, you know, it's not energizing to them.
Right.
I almost think it's energizing almost like people are to an E.
Like, yes. Yeah, no, I could agree with that. Yeah. And I think I've been really clear with you guys that I'm not a huge sports balls person.
What?
But I think if you talk to a lot of professional athletes, they can definitely identify with the pressure helping them perform at a higher level.
Yes.
Maybe not all of them, but I know, like, in interviews, I've seen that before.
Yeah, like game day is going to be, you're going to do better than...
Right. Game day feels like, man, I can really do this.
Yeah.
I can perform at a higher level because of the pressure that I'm feeling.
Right. Whereas, you know, I know when I was... I don't consider it to, like... Yeah, that was what I was going to say.
Wah, wah, wah. This is an example of not being pressure prompted.
Exactly. I don't have words anymore. I don't consider public speaking to be performing to me because I'm talking about something that I've talked about so much that it's no longer possible for it to be pressure prompted, if that makes sense.
Right.
But, you know, like when, oh my gosh, me in the 3rd grade talent show.
Okay. Tell me about it.
Oh, we had practiced and practiced and practiced. It was a gymnastics routine with my then best friend, who I'm surprised spoke to me after this happened. And so when we actually got to like where we were supposed to go out on stage and do the thing, my mind washed over. There was nothing in it. And instead of doing our beautifully choreographed routine, she was doing our beautifully choreographed routine, and I did cartwheels for about 3 solid minutes. So, you know, I was like, once we got
frozen from the pressure.
Right. Yeah, that pressure promptedness made me want to throw up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right. Just recently I had like I think I've shared before, like as an extrovert, it's interesting that I don't love public speaking. But I think the farther in advance I learn I'm going to do it, the worse it is.
That makes sense.
Because I was in front of a large group of people and kind of being introduced in the new role that I was going to be in at work. And maybe like 5 minutes before, one of my bosses was like, hey, can I introduce you and you could say a couple of things? And I'm like, sure. And so I just got up there and just spoke about the position. It wasn't long by any means, but that was one of the easiest times to speak in front of people.
Yeah.
And if he had told me about the exact same time frame, you know what I mean? Like you have 5 minutes or whatever. If he had told me that 3 weeks prior, I probably would have just stewed and brewed and felt weird. And what am I going to say? Right. But the pressure of that moment felt good.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel frozen by it. And the complete opposite would be true for my husband, Chad.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I can't do that. You just told me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, no, I haven't had time.
I don't have notes.
Yeah, I haven't prepped anything. Yeah, so it is absolutely upside down from one another. You know, the J and P thing. And one word that J's and P's, they fight over, struggle with, I don't know, is spontaneity.
Tell us more.
So
I'm just going to keep doing Grease today.
We need a little like, tell me what's up.
We have a car.
Yeah. So spontaneity is interesting because often I've found, I'm sure you have too, whenever you're doing group interpretation, right? Mm-hmm. J's will become very defensive. It's like, we can be spontaneous. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the P's are just kind of like,
You can become what you think is spontaneous.
Exactly. Like, you could tell me this weekend that next weekend we're going to go do X, Y, and Z, and I would be okay with it.
That story I told you about Stacy.
Exactly.
If I had said yes on Wednesday, that would have been way spontaneous for this
look
weekend.
How crazy you
exactly.
are. Yeah. And, you know, P's are just funny. It's like it's like that even feels like a plan. Like the way that you're describing spontaneity still sounds like a plan to me. Spontaneous to me is, I woke up this morning feeling like I would like to pick apples in North Georgia. Let's drive up there and do it today.
Yeah.
That, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't feel like, let's do it. You know what I mean? Like, let's go for it. So it's just really, again, in the same way that we talked through procrastination and defining it and understanding the reasons why we're procrastinating. I think spontaneity is the same way. Define it, and then we'll kind of be able to tell.
Right.
Because I think it sounds like dreamy, you know, like this, like, it does, you know, like, we're spontaneous.
It sounds like a synonym for fun.
Yeah, spontaneous sounds like a synonym for fun.
And Jays don't want to be boring.
Right.
So we think that, we have to be spontaneous to be fun.
Right. We don't want to say like, we don't like spontaneity or surprises. I have a daughter. My oldest daughter, she will actually verbalize. She's like, I don't like surprises.
Yeah.
And I'm not spontaneous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and she's only in 6th grade.
Right.
And she's like, please don't ever throw me a surprise birthday party.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and she means it. She's like, please don't do that. And so it's funny, you know, some Jays are they're just like, it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, no, I don't like that. I don't know what to tell you. But there, you know, in doing those group interpretations, it was always funny, you know, because people get a little like puffy or like defensive, like, we can be spontaneous.
Well, and, you know, I think perceiving types in those situations too are like, oh God, they're going to tell us we're terrible.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said, there's so many situations where you really want a perceiving type to have that burst of energy for you.
Right. Yeah. And to know how to work under pressure.
Yeah.
It's wild. And it's interesting how early on it starts.
Oh, yeah.
How the pressure you can see like really ignites even children versus freezes some children.
Yeah.
And again, like just, you know, watching that early on is interesting for me. I was in the 8th grade when Mom and I were in a really bad car accident. Mm-hmm. We totaled a Crown Vic. And if you know what a Crown Vic, it's a huge, Mom called it a land yacht.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we totaled a Crown Vic between a telephone pole and a tree. Thankfully, we didn't hit it head on. We hit like the sides of the cars. Anyway, it was raining. It was opening night of Into the Woods.
Oh, wow.
And I was the witch.
Oh.
And I didn't get to do it. It was so sad. Oh. Anyway, so it was bad. It was a bad car accident, which is the more important part and less important that I missed opening night, but still sad.
Yeah.
All those lines that I memoralized, that were gone because I was on, you know, pain medicine. Like I definitely couldn't do it. But in the moment, we wreck, and the vehicle that kind of caused the accident, I don't think knew that they caused the accident.
Okay.
So they kept going. So it was really just Mom and I, and we kind of were off the side of the road. And it was torrential downpours. So even the cars coming by may or may not have seen, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Anyway, so we're off this side of the road, and I can tell Mom's really hurt. And I don't know, because I'm in 8th grade. I know now that when airbags deploy, they smoke. Mm-hmm. Like there's like a dust in the air.
Yeah.
So my 8th grade self was like, okay, we've been in an accident. The car is on fire. That's the only thing I can think. Like we need to get out.
Right.
And Mom had a big cell phone.
She's in a car that's made out of metal.
Exactly. So I got his cell phone, and I'm calling my dad. And I said, Dad, Mom and I were on our way home from school. We've been in a bad car accident. We are at the corner of this road and this. I'm like,
yep.
And Dad said he didn't even believe me.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm first on the phone with him, he's
because you were like adult
I was just, again, pressure prompted in that moment. And I'm like, I got to get mom out of the car and I have to call my dad and I have to call 911. And dad was like, I'll call 911. We'll be there. So in the meantime, I'm taking care of mom. And so much pressure prompted and using that adrenaline to feel inspired, right? Some people's adrenaline makes them feel frozen. Some people's adrenaline makes them feel inspired. And using that moment to get all of these things done. And the ambulance gets there and they take care of mom because she's more injured than I am. And then all of a sudden, an EMT looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I hadn't even, you know what I mean? Like, I just hadn't even considered that. And I passed out.
Oh, no. Well, that was pressure prompted too, wasn't it? Oh, wait, no, bye.
Yeah. And I think, part of that was because of adrenaline and trauma and all of that. But just interesting, even really early on in life, that pressure either feels like drive and inspiration, to do something, or if it really just feels like it's going to freeze you.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's just a good J&P story.
Interesting.
For you, for, early age. And it, again, there's more to it. There's adrenaline and there's, other layers to that. But even in 8th grade, the pressure was like, let's get things done.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like I just went into this like crazy like robot mode or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it had, some people are like, oh, that's, whatever. I don't think it often has things to do with like courage and you know what I mean? Like I think some people want to attribute things like that to that. I think really has a lot to do with that pressure prompted piece.
Right. Well, so I think that pretty much brings us to the end of our JP discussion. And do you know what that means?
Yay, we've gotten through all 4.
Yay, all 4 sets of preferences and the basics. And so that means that we'll start to get into some more specific type things and some more of putting those preferences together to see how they interact with each other. And I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
So I guess on that note, we thank you guys for joining us, and we're going to cue the ninjas.
Cue the ninjas.
I'm not going to point which way they're supposed to go because Lord knows I don't seem to know which way they're supposed to go. But they know what they're doing.
Yes. Enjoy your day.
Enjoy your day. Thank you for watching. Bye.